Say hello to everyone out there. My name is Chris Collier. I am the Executive Director of Renew Theaters, operating the Ambler Theater, County Theater, Highway Theater, and Princeton Garden Theaters. And I'm really thrilled to be able to share this interview with you today. I have with me Tom Putnam, the writer and director of The Dark Divide, and Bob Pyle, who's the author of the book that it's based on, but also the actual butterfly and moth expert from the film. So we're very excited to have this opportunity to talk with both of them about this incredible film. So first, I'd just like to say thank you to you both for being here, and to open it up with a question, just asking how this project came together. Tom, how did you come across the book, and what was it like working together to get this film made?
A friend gave me the book about 10 years ago and said, "You're going to love it, and it's impossible to make into a movie, so don't think about doing that." And he was almost right. I read the book, and it takes place in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington. I grew up near there, and growing up, I mean, that's where I spent my weekends, fishing and camping and hiking, and during a lot of the period that Bob writes about. So for me, it took me back to a really important place in my life. And I live in Los Angeles now, and I have a son who's 12, and his favorite things are fishing and camping and hiking. And it just reminded me about what I missed, and what, not as a native Oregonian, but just as a person, what I really need in my life and had lost touch with. And the way Bob writes is so visceral, and he has this amazing gift of putting you inside his head so you see the world through his eyes and you think the thoughts he thinks in that moment. It just transported me in a way that not a lot of things have. And I fell in love with it. And then I met Bob, and I adore Bob. He's one of my favorite humans. And then ended up reading his other books, and we ended up incorporating 7 of those in the movie. And just over the past 10 years of working together to get this made, just sort of evolved into the finished film.
That's incredible. Can you speak a bit, Bob, about your experience? And I mean, did you ever, obviously in the film, I don't think you ever expected to go on this adventure. But then after writing the book, did you ever expect this to be made into a movie? And can you talk about the process from your side?
Oh, thank you, Chris. Well, I think every writer thinks about the cinematic possibilities of his writing. And though most of my writing in the past has always been nonfiction, I write in a narrative fashion largely. So from time to time, it's occurred to me. I have written a novel more recently, Magdalena Mountain, and I'm hoping to talk Tom into looking at that one when this is all done. But in any case, no, I didn't think it would become a movie. One of my books, Chasing Monarchs, had been made into a documentary by a German public television crew that I spent 2 months on the road with, but it was never shown in this country, just in Europe. And I didn't think much more about it. So when I heard from Tom that he was interested in signing up an option for this thing, I thought, well, what can we lose? And sat back, and over the years, as the option was renewed, I kept optimistic, and I kept watching Tom's films and getting to know him and becoming very fond of him too, by the way, and of his filmmaking. Tom Putnam is an extraordinary filmmaker, and every one of his films has knocked me off my feet. So to think of him working on it was a dream to start with. But then, as it began to evolve in Tom's mind into a narrative film with some fictional component, but every episode in the book based on something that really happened in life, I had to make an adjustment, of course, mentally to that, and go along with that, and understand that some things would be a little bit slant, as Emily Dickinson says, tell the truth, but tell it slant. So, but that was easy to do because the script was so good, and he kept letting me be involved in that, and I got to help with the evolution of it. So I came out very happy with the outcome, and then to have one's art translated into another form of art by a consummate artist, working with several others. This is a stunning cast. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But to have David Cross portray me, and to have Deborah Messing portray Tia, I feel unimaginably fortunate in all of this. And to put a fine point on it, I'm having much too much fun during my plague. I feel guilty about it.
That's wonderful. Thinking about the cast, you just mentioned those wonderful that wonderful team that has come together. Was it strange for you? And I'd like to learn more about the casting process, but as you just mentioned, um, watching your story come to life, can you talk a little bit about what it was like watching the filming process and seeing someone portray you and portray Tia, and how you were able to engage with that?
Sure, it was thrilling, of course, to start with. Anybody's dream that they might be able to see such a thing. I've been on a film set before. I was a caterpillar wrangler for a film made by Michael Crichton starring Tom Selleck. I was the bug man on the scene. Uh, so I got to be on a really big, fairly big budget Hollywood film, but this is very, very different, of course. Um, so I wasn't quite, I knew a little bit about being on a site, but this was much more special because I was actually, as you say, being portrayed by one of the actors. To watch David play me was bizarre, strange, odd, weird, and wonderful. And more than anything, humbling, because as I say, I admire his acting so much. And he's a different person from me, and yet he studied me. We went out in the field together. Tom and he and I went out and had a field trip to teach him how to catch butterflies, which he learned very quickly. Quick study, that boy. And we had a lot of fun. So to see him playing me was wonderful. To see Deborah playing Tia, I got to watch one scene that they filmed together. And that, of course, was difficult for me emotionally, except it was also a great celebration because she did it so well. She brought Tia to life so wonderfully. And she too studied Tia. She asked me for many pictures. She talked with my daughter about her. She really studied her in order to inhabit her skin for this part. So to be on the set and to watch all the workings of this incredible, lean, but extremely professional crew operating and making art under difficult situations in a short time, it was stunning. I really got to go to 2 sets, 2 shoots. One of them was all night long on the Columbia River Island with the Native American cast, who were stupendous. I got to hang out with them and David Keckner for several hours, because there's a lot of waiting around in this thing. And boy, what fun.
Oh, well, thank you for that answer.
Fun most of all, Chris. Fun and humbling.
Yes. I mean, you mentioned being out on the gorge, and obviously this film is supposed to take place, or that the hike is over a month. Can you talk about, Tom, and can you talk about the filming process and how long you were out and where you were and how you took people out into the woods to give us that feeling of being out in the wilderness?
Yeah, we shot the film very quickly. It was a 22-day shoot, and if you see, you've seen the film, like we're all over the place. So it was really a lot of like running and moving. Whenever possible, we tried to film in the real locations where Bob's story took place, but some of those locations are dedicated, or they're wilderness areas where you're not allowed to film. So we would try to match those in other locations where we could film. And, in some cases, Bob writes about the old growth, and that's not necessarily there now. It's 25 years later. So it was a big process to find the locations. And if a location in the film looks rugged and dangerous and high altitude or whatever, that's because it was. One of the exciting things about working with a small crew, and I come from the documentary background, was we were able to go to a lot of places a bigger film crew would never be able to go. There's like narrow trails with, drop-offs of hundreds of feet, or we were in a lava tunnel that's a real lava tunnel that is not a tourist attraction. And it was really dangerous and very sharp and very cold. And it was exciting because we were small enough that when something happened, if we had a thunder shower or, a location suddenly fell through, we could turn around and jump in a truck and go shoot somewhere else. And hopefully that comes across in the film, that you really feel like you're way out and on a journey and through a lot of different locations as David's character of Bob goes through some like pretty amazing changes too.
No, that definitely comes across. You definitely feel out there and in the wilderness yourself. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And I also do have to congratulate you on there's some really wonderful just moments in terms of how you play with things. I think the one that jumps out to me is there's a great montage showing Bob becoming comfortable that has him crossing the different bridges.
Yep.
And then an amazing bit of, visual startleness when you're in the water, and then it takes a second for you to realize that, yeah, he didn't make it across that one.
Yeah.
At that moment, in particular, it felt very traditional in terms of a montage, but then took a great twist that I thought, pushed me in a way that reminded me of how dangerous everything was. Can you talk about other challenges that you might have had in terms of figuring out how to bring that danger into film, or how to adapt things such that it worked in a filmic medium?
Sure. One of the things that was really important to me, speaking of that scene and other scenes, is I wanted the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, I wanted nature to be its own character. And it's a character that's constantly, whenever Bob is starting to build himself up and get confident, it pulls the rug out from under him or plays a practical joke on him. And sometimes those are, more often than not, those are like life and death situations. And it was important to me to create a like palpable sense of danger there. And the idea that, you're on one of these narrow trails, you take one wrong step or you don't pay attention for 10 seconds and you could die. There's an amazing moment in Bob's book where he climbs to the top of a hill, he's winded, he has the pack on, and he sees this butterfly and he overextends just a little too far trying to catch it. And he almost like, Wile E. Coyotes off the side of a cliff. And that's in the movie. And
it's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the wonderful things about David was when you see that and you see that danger, that's him. He just was the guy that's like, hang me off the cliff, put me in the water. That scene you were talking about with the water, that water was like maybe 40 degrees. And when we had to shoot it twice, and when he got out, he literally didn't know where he was. He couldn't speak. And there were a lot of scary moments like that, but he just put himself out there. And had he not been willing to do that, especially with our little budget, the movie wouldn't have worked. And the way I shoot, coming from a documentary background, for it to feel real to me, it needs to feel real somewhat. So there's moments where, David's off the side of the cliff, the camera's off the side of the cliff, and you can tell it's not digital. You're out in a very dangerous, situation with him.
Can you talk a little more about the casting of David? I'm sure a lot of us know him primarily from his comedic roles. So to see him, deal with all of these extremes in terms of what his character goes through, he's incredible. But I just want to know how you ended up selecting him for this role.
Sure. When we started casting the film, it had been 8 years. It's now been 10 years. And, I'd gotten to know Bob very well. I'd read most of it, not most of, he's written a lot of books, 24 books, but I've read, let's say, a third of them. And I had a very set idea of who Bob was in my mind. And I knew the character in the book was going to be different than that. Just, it always is. And so I tried not to have any preconceptions of what the actor would be, other than a few things. I knew that they're in every scene in the movie except for like 2 very small, like 15-second scenes. We're looking right at them. They have to pull us through the movie. There's 35-minute section of the movie where there's no dialogue. And they needed to pull us into that world, make us smile, make us cry, and most importantly, bring out the humanity in the character in a way that surprises us. And sent the script to David, who I've been a fan of for a long time. And he responded to it, and we sat down. He was in Los Angeles. We sat down for a beer, and we were there like 3 hours. And he just got the film in such a primal, emotional way that I got really excited. And I started to, for the first time, instead of seeing like the actual Bob Pyle, starting to see what the character of the film was going to be. And I'm so excited for people to see it. I mean, David's going to surprise him with what he does. And he'll tell you, he goes to a place that, he's never gone to before. And it runs the gamut. And, now that the movie's over, I can't imagine having made it with anybody else, not just for his chops, but his ability from his comedic background to improvise. I mean, we had so many moments where things happen. You can shoot, the thing that I'd been writing for 8 years, and he just always, we huddled and we came up with a new idea. And more often than not, I was much happier with what we came up with than what I set out to do.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Bob, is it weird to watch someone play you? But he's playing Bob Pyle, but he's not playing you exactly. It's not like I'm playing Winston Churchill and I have to match his every mannerism.
Right. Well, sure, it was strange, but on the other hand, I'm not naive about this. I've seen a lot of good films and I've read a lot of good novels, and I've known a lot of people. I've known a few people who have been adapted for film, but not well. I have 3 friends, all of whom vie among themselves as to which of their books was made into the worst movie. And I'm so thrilled that I'm not joining their number. No movie's going to be exactly what the book was. I mean, sometimes The Great Notion is a delightful movie. Never mind, Paul Newman was crocked all the way through making it. But it didn't fully please Kesey. Well, what does he want? Life and film and art are different things, and they complement one another. So sure, it was a little bit strange for me at first to see some of the divergences from myself as a person. But Tom, we worked on that script for a long time. And so I was used to it, and I knew what you were trying to accomplish. And once you had cast David, and I could settle into who this was going to be, I could watch a lot of reruns of the programs he's been in. He's been in a number of series, but of course he's best known for Arrested Development, and I watched a lot I hadn't seen before. And then when I saw him playing Allen Ginsberg on the back of a Vespa motor scooter, talking with Bob Dylan, who was actually Kate, in the car, in the movie I'm Not There, I said, wow, how cool that this guy's playing me. And I hope he doesn't try to be exactly me. So I'm not the doofus going into the woods, that he was. True. But he's got to have some room to grow as a narrative character. He's also got to have some room for his comic chops. And if that hadn't been the case, that'd be very dull. I grew out there, I did. I went through those dangers and I came out a better woodsman than I went in. But you enhanced that contrast by setting the poles farther apart. And I think that was a brilliant artistic decision. So yes, it was strange, but it was more than anything invigorating. And I keep coming back to the word humbling. What would I do to deserve this kind of artistic attention in my work?
You wrote a great book.
And to myself. Yeah. Lucky boy.
In sticking with casting, Deborah Messing is a real emotional center point to this film, not only setting the whole trip in motion, but she is not in the film. And while Tia imbues the whole of the film, Deborah Messing's character is only in a couple scenes, but those are really, really powerful scenes. Can you talk about how you shaped those and how you found Deborah Messing to work on that? Because they really provide the engine and the energy for everything that follows.
Yeah, to me, her performance is so powerful and so emotional that even when she's not in the movie, you feel her there, and you can see how, as Bob David reacts certain ways, and you can kind of feel her voice in his head. I made my dream list of actresses, and Deborah was right up there at the top, and I didn't think we would ever get her. And we won the lottery. She responded to the script, and I did not know at the time her mother had died of cancer, and we talked about that. So it really hit home for her, and she threw herself into it with a level of research and immersion that I had never seen. By the time she came to set, she knew so much about Tia and had talked to so many people and knew step by step exactly what her character would be going through in this process. And she has cancer in the film. And she just like whoever Deborah Messing is in real life, she was Tia at the second she stepped foot on set every day. And when you watch her scenes, most or maybe all of her scenes were shot in one, maybe sometimes two takes. She was just so focused, and it was so, coming from documentaries, it felt so real to me. And like I was just watching this thing unfold. I just knew we had to capture it when it happened. And she and David, they feel like they've been married for 20, 30 years. And there's little things they do, little ticks and things. There's a moment when David's filling her pills, her like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And she says a little something to him, and he has this just little reaction. And then she has a little reaction back. And in these tiny little moments, you get a whole sense of the weight of their relationship. And that was honestly something that I would never have expected that we would have been able to capture. And that's just total testament to their craft and ability to just bring that like magic. Bob wants to say something.
May I add a word to that, Chris? Well, not if you weren't finished, Tom.
No, I'm totally.
I just like to say that when they expressed those tics and those mannerisms, I was stunned by the reality that it evoked in me. Of course, several scenes I bawl my eyes out every time I see it. I can't help it, probably always will. But that's because it's so real for me. And I want to say this too about Deborah. She was an absolute sweetheart in person to me, certainly. And I know a lot of people know that she's a sweet person, but she's also a very, very tough person and a very, very smart person, as is David. And one thing I particularly appreciate about both of them is how socially engaged they are and how socially conscious and how much they have done for their communities. They're always doing things for the betterment of communities. And that comes through in their personas in the movie, I think, and in their persons when you're together with them. So all of that made me feel awfully good about it. But when I see them on the porch at the old farmhouse, which is very much like my place, it's us. I feel as if I'm back there. And what a gift that is. What a gift that has been. So congratulations, Tom, and thank you.
It's hey, without you, none of us would have been here. I don't know what I would have done with the last 10 years. They would have been much more boring.
Yeah, that's a pretty strange feeling, by the way, to have the impact on so many people's lives. I feel that way with every book I write, and every time some person picks up a book, good gosh, they're spending their time because of what I've done. But with this, to see this crackerjack crew, what a crew you had, and then to realize that they're all practicing the heights of their professional acumen and expertise on account of something I've done. What can I possibly call that feeling? But they were wonderful. I admired your crew so much. Oh, that's what I want to say. Every member of the crew I spoke with, and I spoke to almost all of them, signed books for a lot of them, which was pretty sweet. But also the cast, all of the cast, everyone I got to meet and talk with, every single person talked about the reason they were doing the movie was because they loved the script so much. That was absolute concurrence in that. And I think that will come through for all the viewers.
Yeah, definitely nobody was there because they were getting a big fat paycheck. They all were there because they wanted to be there. You were talking about that porch scene, and I can remember standing back and I was watching you watch Deborah play Tia. I can't, like, the expression on your face, I can't even describe it. It was one of the like amazing and weirdest things I've ever seen. It was like you were watching something in the fourth dimension, that was one of the high points of not just my career, but just my life on this planet, getting to see that happen for you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry.
No, it's I'm close, but it was like you brought Tia back to me, Tom.
I have this amazing picture on my desktop with, after that scene, like Deborah came over and hugged you, and you guys have these amazing smiles on your faces. And that just was like, I don't know, that made it all worth it to me.
Those got to be some of the cuter selfies that have been around for a while. And by the way, on that theme, this is National Ovarian Cancer Month right now. So it's particularly appropriate that it is coming out when it is. And I hope it'll cause a lot of women to get checked, to watch their health very carefully. It's not an easy disease to diagnose. Ovarian cancer, Tia had 10 years of mostly good life with it, but a lot of ordeal too that Deborah portrays. And set some records, but it afflicts way, way too many women, and too many of them at an advanced stage. So let's hope the film has the added benefit of causing women and their partners to seek the attention they need for their own health.
Bob, I don't know if you know this. Yeah, I knew it was Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. One of our partners on the film is the Ovarian Cancer Research Association. And we've been working with them to put together a fact list and like a little one-page flyer people can get that we're getting up on the website in the coming days as well. I learned a lot about that, making the film and now after the film. I have a little more understanding of what it must have been like for you, like this much of an understanding. And I just can't imagine, having just putting the film together to watch like 10 minutes or 12 minutes of 10 years of that time. It's one of the things I think people forget about is the caregivers.
Yes.
As well, and the challenges they have too.
You can see that in David's face in that scene with the filling the pills. That's a masterful little scene in the bedroom. And it, by the way, it shows off a number of pieces of Tia's art. There's one behind me above the mural of the butterflies, a little triptych of her prints, and that's shown off in that scene. But when David's going through those little pill bottles and he's saying, well, we're out of this one, I'm gonna have to send so-and-so to get some more and so on and so forth, you can see in his face how those years of caregiving draw upon a person, and they do. Now you caught it with sheer magic, Tom.
That was all David. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it. Chris, we're just talking to each other now. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. This was really wonderful to hear, and I do hope that we'll put a link to some of the ovarian cancer information on our site too, and hopefully we can use the film to drive some awareness of that as well. But in hearing you just talking about this, I guess it made me reflect on, I mean, this is not a film just about, the trailer makes it feel like it's just like a bumbling adventure story, someone going out into nature. No, not in that, just in a way of how it sells it. But when you're watching the film, you realize that there's a whole lot more almost spiritual and deeper, heartfelt to it. And what you were just speaking about is, it's where it wells from. One of the other things that I noticed in watching the film is because of that sort of awareness and the way that it plays with the spiritualism of the wilderness, its view on conservation and sort of how people engage with the wilderness is not just a stark black and white, but there's a really opening up in terms of how different people engage with things. And I really loved that the movie is not just a simple black and white film. It is a very complex movie that talks about spiritualism, that talks about relationships, but it also talks about the relationships to the outdoors. And that really, I left with more questions necessarily than answers at the end. And I wanted to know if you could speak to, how you worked in some of those elements of, views on conservation and how all different types of people engage with the environment.
Hopefully that stays true to Bob's writing and the complexities that he explores and the different perspectives. I mean, Bob, do you want to sort of share your perspective? I mean, you wrote Evergreen, right?
Wintergreen.
Wintergreen, I'm sorry.
Everybody calls it Evergreen. That's just fine. Wintergreen was a testimonial to living in a damaged land here in the Willapa Hills. The wonderful mural behind you, Tom, of all the standing trees is what the Willapa Hills once looked like. And now they're much, much more patchy. There's been a lot of private logging here for many, many years. And I wrote a book about that called Wintergreen quite a few years ago. It's not an anti-logging book, as I hope comes out in the, I think, very well done logging crew encounter scene in the movie. there's a lot to learn on both sides and a dialogue to be had. I mean, I know what my books are printed on is the flesh of the trees, as Barry Lopez says, and what the jobs are in my community. So it's not easy. We're all complicit in the fiber economy. We all take part in this. So we didn't want the movie in any way to be divisive, to try to put the spotted owl on one side and loggers on the other side. Of course, those biases and those reductions come out in the story, but we hope that the dialogue that David Cross has with Gary Farmer, it actually brings to light a lot of the thoughts that are in Wintergreen and a lot of my other writing about how we learn that to take care of the forest means to take care of the people of the forest too, including the loggers and the communities and the spotted owls, not one or the other. So there's that. But my biggest hope for the movie, aside from being a successful, work of art and the human aspects we've been talking about, which were way realized, my other two biggest hopes were that, yes, it would speak to people in a ragged, hard time that we're all living through for many reasons. The smoke is only now dispersing from right here, from a very high level of smoke from the forest fires, and then there's everything else. Well, what is the balm to the trials that we're facing? One of the great balms, as Richard Louv showed us in his book, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Ourselves from Nature Deficit Disorder, is that we do have a nature deficit disorder. We don't have sufficient contact, many of us, with the rest of nature. We're part of nature, but there are so many other cast members, so many other species, and they bring us a balm. And David, clearly, Bob, in this movie, acquires some redemption, acquires some peace, and strength of will and mind, and grows as a person who's going to be better able to take care of not only his grief, but the other trials of life. And he does that through getting out of himself and into the person of the dark divide in this case. But people can do that in any place out of doors and sometimes indoors, including a vacant lot if they can't get out to a forest. The idea is to gain the peace and solace of nature by putting ourselves amongst it with an intimate reaction with other kinds of life around us. So I hope this will bring that home. I've done a lot of writing on that score, and this movie pushes it forward as well as anything I think I've been involved with. The other thing is I want it to be an explicit document for the conservation of this particular wildland, which is the largest unprotected wilderness in Washington. I hope not to croak, not to put a finer point on it, without seeing a dark divide wilderness area created, without seeing that land finally protected. It only has provisional protection right now. And I hope the movie will be a strong shot in the arm for that goal in the future. Not just the dark divide, but I hope it will stand in for wildness everywhere, which I think Bigfoot does, and I think butterflies do too.
I'm glad you snuck Bigfoot in there, because that was another wonderful surprise in the film. And I think that tied into what I was talking about, of the spiritual nature of the movie. I loved how the Bigfoot elements were handled and treated. And I know that from the credits, it mentions your ongoing conversations about Bigfoot. Was there anything you wanted to share or anything further? Actually, just out of curiosity, did you, while filming, have any encounters or anything that Tom made you switch to Bob's side, I'd say, in terms of Bigfoot thinking?
I wish. No, I would have much rather had the Bigfoot than the mountain lion or the bear. Yeah, there were some big scary creatures that we encountered, because we're out in pretty rugged, remote locations. But alas, I have yet to see a Bigfoot. Although I would really like to live in a world where that's possible. Wouldn't the surprise of discovering a Bigfoot be so much better than the surprises we've had the last 6 or 7 months? Like, the thing I loved about Bob's book, in a world that there's a million Bigfoot movies or Bigfoot books or whatever, he had such a unique perspective. Here's Bob, who's a Yale educated PhD, and when he talks about his encounters, it's completely different than anything else I've read. He looks at it from the point of view of a scientist, and the message I got from the film or from the book that I hope we relay in the film is that it doesn't really matter whether Bigfoot exists or not. It's about the power that has to connect us to our past and remind us that we're part of nature. And that to me was an incredibly powerful thing that you don't have to see Bigfoot to have that. You can just go on a hike through the woods.
Tom's got that right, Chris, I think. I'll say one more little word about Bigfoot. I won't go on about it. This is the book that the film was ultimately based on, where Bigfoot walks crossing the Dark Divide. I think it's really the Dark Divide is such a cool name. I think that's why I got the Guggenheim Fellowship. I think that's why I got the book contract, and probably why Tom made the movie, because that very cool name, the Dark Divide. I mean, what a name for a place, because it could stand for the divide between belief and non-belief, between the spiritual and the practical, between the other and ourselves. It could stand for so many things, the divide between anything. But the Dark Divide is the name of this black rock ridge that runs across the Cascades perpendicular to the axis of the range and between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams. And that's where the action takes place. That's where the book mostly takes place. But the difference is that the book had rather more emphasis on Bigfoot than the movie does. And but the butterflies are there too, of course. And I think Tom made a really smart decision to shift the balance of those somewhat in the movie. It's not a Bigfoot movie as such. I mean, you know, if it were, it'd be in a category of a number of films, most of them bad, a couple of them okay, but they're kind of comic, and they're not films that people are going to pay a lot of attention to, probably, unless they're enamored of this subject. On the other hand, by having it be very much a human movie where humans are encountering all kinds of the other, and one of those things is the possible presence of this animal, the footprints, the ultimate final scene, which I won't spoil for people, but it was absolutely true to what really happened to me. And then the occasional possible flicker through the woods and so on and so forth, as well as a growing sense on David Bob's part that maybe there was something worth actually paying attention to here. Maybe it wasn't just the tabloid joke that appears in the opening scene in the store up in the mountains. Well, my own experiences have been such not to convince me as a biologist that the animal actually exists, because I haven't seen it. And I am a trained scientist. I need more evidence than I've had, but the evidence I have seen, including 3 encounters with tracks, are such that I can't dismiss it out of hand either. In other words, what I've come out with so far is an open mind. And in fact, the question of whether it physically exists isn't even the most important question. It certainly wasn't in the book. It's not in the movie. It's the possibility, as Tom says, of something wild out there, something beyond the campfire, some mystery, not necessarily mystical, but mystery. Don't we need that? And don't we want that? And so I'd like to think that if we manage to protect some significant portion of putative Bigfoot habitat, whether or not it walks, we'll save one of the greatest green treasures we've ever known. But if we so tame the land that nobody can even imagine the presence of giant hairy apes, then we will have lost something profound. And I hope the movie comes down on the side of an open mind and on the side of a bit of mystery and joy and fun and delight in the wild world.
That's amazing.
I was going to say, it absolutely does. And I can't think of a better way to wrap things up right now. I really do appreciate your time. And I hope that all of those feelings are conveyed to everyone as they watch the film. I certainly felt them, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really thrilled to be able to offer this film to our audience, and hope that they take away the sense of wonder and beauty and majesty that you both imbued in this title.
Thank you. Thank you again for showing it, especially during these times. You know, there's people have so much on their minds.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Your adept interview, and again, for paying attention to our movie.
Well, again, thank you, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your night, and best wishes to the opening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.